What's up, you guys? It's Graham here. So most people are broke, but they don't even know it yet. Here's the thing. When it comes to money, it's extremely obvious that the financial gap is quickly widening between the rich and the poor. And once you fall behind, it's almost impossible to catch back up. Like the difference between being in the top 1% and the bottom 10% could all come down to one decision that you've already made without even realizing it. That's why it's so important that we break down the average income and net worth by every age so that you could see exactly how you stack up, how you could get yourself ahead as fast as possible, and the easiest steps that you could take today to build substantial wealth, because most people have no idea just how easy it is to build a ton of money. And by the end of the video, you're going to have a complete blueprint for achieving financial freedom, even if you're starting out with absolutely nothing. Although before we go into that, if you appreciate videos like this, it would mean the world to me if you invested in the like button or subscribed if you haven't done that already. It's totally free. It takes you a split second. It helps out the entire channel tremendously. And as a thank you for doing that, I will do my best to read and reply to as many of your comments as I can. So thanks so much, and also a big thank you to Dropbox for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. All right, so to start, the first number we should talk about is net worth. This is calculated by adding up everything that you own of value, subtracting your debt, and everything that's left over is your net worth. So with that out of the way, I want you to think what the average net worth is of a 25-year-old. Seriously, just go ahead, think of a number. Got it? Well, that number is negative $23,704, meaning if you're watching this in your mid-20s and you have $0 to your name, then technically you are ahead of the average. Now, of course, in fairness, this number is skewed entirely by student loan debt, since young people are earning nothing to begin with and then take out an average of $38,000 worth of loans before earning a single penny. So these numbers do end up getting a bit better with age, but not by much. According to Empower Financial data, the median net worth of those in their 20s is just $7,638. Again, a reflection of those who take on enormous student loan debts while going to school. And the average is $113,000, which is likely pulled up by those closer to the age of 30 who have begun building their career. Oh, and speaking of those people, if you want to be within the top 1% of this category at 25 years old, this requires an income of $650,000 and a net worth of $350,000. That's why if you want to put yourself ahead and make sure you're set up financially throughout your 30s and 40s, I would recommend these 5 steps. First, go and apply for a credit card. The point of this is to begin building up your credit score as soon as possible, since 50% of your score is made up of your on-time payment history and how long you've opened your credit cards for. All of this is really just as simple as opening up a free, no annual fee credit card, putting a few small expenses on it every single month, and then paying it off in full by the time it's due. That's it. Second, you should also make sure to open up a Roth IRA. This is a retirement account that you can contribute up to $7,000 a year into, and then by the age of 59 and a half, all the profit you make within the account is completely tax-free. So if you're watching this right now and you haven't already done this, go and sign up for a Roth IRA as soon as possible. Pause the video for all I care. It'll take you 10 minutes to do, and your future self is going to thank you. After that, though, third, I'd highly recommend saving 20% of your income. Now, usually I'd recommend setting a more strict measurement here, like save 2 to 3 months worth of your expenses. But I think it's incredibly important at this age to start getting in the habit of building a good financial foundation. And if you could save 20% of your income here, it's going to be that much easier to continue this throughout your 30s and 40s, especially when the average Gen Z savings rate is just 3.4%. And fourth, just get yourself invested in the markets in one way or another. By doing this, you'll get the experience of investing on a small scale, and then over time, you could just replicate the strategies and put it on autopilot. In fact, if you want to make a ton of money investing, it's so simple that it's said that everything you'd ever need to know for life could be written on an index card. And if you're curious what that is, it's right here on the screen. Just pause the video. There you go. You're welcome. And finally, there's one last point I want to mention, and it's this. Now is the time to start thinking about how much money you need to save for retirement. I know this is not something that most people in their 20s want to think about, but you gotta trust me. The sooner you start, the easier it's going to be, and the more rich you're just gonna get. For example, if you want your money to give you $50,000 a year in income for life without you ever working, you could do that with $1,250,000 invested. If you start at the age of 20, you'd be able to do this entirely within a Roth IRA with just $419 a month. This is why it's so important to set good financial habits as soon as possible, because you're going to see significant net worth milestones in your 30s. This is where good financial habits, low debt, and strong savings starts to make a huge difference. For example, the median net worth of those in their 30s is $35,649. The average is $317,000. And if you want to be in the top 1% of this category, you would need to have a net worth anywhere from $956,000 to $4 million, depending on which bracket you fall in. Now, in terms of how much the average 35-year-old is earning, that amount was recently found to be $82,871 a year. The median salary is $61,500 a year. And if you want to make it to the top 1% of all 35-year-old earners, that'll take $400,000 a year. But then, of course, if you want to make it to the top 0.1%, you'll need an income of more than $2 million a year. The way I see it, this is really the point where you begin to notice that the choices and trajectory that you set in your 20s become very apparent by the time you hit your 30s. The prior decade really just builds the foundation, the skills you build, the risks you take, and the financial habits that you form that'll either give you a huge head start or leave you playing catch up. So in terms of the actionable steps that you could take throughout your 30s that give you the best chance possible at coming out ahead, here's what I recommend. Number 1, make sure to completely get rid of any bad debt. This means you've paid down your loans above a 7% interest rate, you don't have any credit card or personal loans, and besides maybe a mortgage, you don't have any other debt that's weighing you down. Second, you should also start to realize that the most valuable asset you have isn't necessarily money, it's time. This is why I find it so surprising when I see people wasting hours on things that barely move the needle, like digging through email threads, finding that one document you're looking for, or going between 5 different apps to find what you need. It's ineffective, it's inefficient, it breaks your focus, and it literally costs you money. No joke, I think it's pretty safe to say that we've all been there at some point, which is why my favorite solution is our sponsor, Dropbox Dash. This is genuinely one of the few tools that makes your workday cleaner, faster, and more organized. How? Well, Dropbox Dash is AI-powered search and organization that connects all of your work applications in one place so that you could quickly find, organize, and securely share content with the right people without wasting time. Like, here's what makes it incredible. First, Dash searches all of your content in one place, from work tools like Dropbox, Gmail, Google Drive, OneDrive, Google Calendar, Slack, you name it, to find what you need. This means whether it's a document, video, or upcoming meeting, just type in what you're looking for and it shows up fast. You don't even have to remember where it is. Second, you could chat with Dash. So instead of opening up 10 tabs to find an answer, I could type in a question like, which podcast are we posting this Sunday? And from there, Dash finds and summarizes an answer from all of my connected content. It even links to the source so I could double check for accuracy. And for anybody running multiple projects or teams, stacks are a total game changer. I've got one for YouTube, one for the podcast, and one for just contracts. Everything is organized and shareable with just a single click. Then finally, there's the start page, where everything is viewable in one place, from upcoming meetings, recently updated documents, go-to links, and even one-click joins for Zoom and Teams. Plus, the best part about Dash is that it works across desktop, mobile, and browser, so you could use it wherever you're working. So if you're serious about building something, whether it's a business, a brand, or just staying on top of everything, this is one of the best tools that you could add to your workflow. If you want to try Dash with your team today, my link is down below in the description. Thank you so much, Dropbox, for partnering with me on this. And now let's get back to the video. All right, so in terms of the third goal to hit in your 30s, aim to have a credit score above 750. This is going to put you in the best chance possible at getting a low interest rate mortgage or getting approved for anything at the best possible rate. Fourth, keep a 3 to 6 month emergency fund at all times. Doing this is as simple as calculating how much money you spend every month on housing, food, insurance, car payments, and so on, and then saving up 3 to 6 months worth of those expenses just in case you need it. This will be your safety net to fall back on that'll give you the chance to pursue even bigger opportunities. Fifth, try to save at least 20% of your income. My personal approach when it comes to this is that anytime I make more money, I just pretend the extra money doesn't exist. I sock it away, and then I live exactly as I have been, except now I'm able to increase my savings rate. I don't even notice it. And 6, if you want to be on track for retirement, by 35, your net worth should be 4 times your annual expenses or 2 times your annual income. When it comes to this, Mr. Money Mustache has the perfect chart that shows you exactly how much you need to save in order to retire. For example, someone who saves 10% of their income could retire after 51 years, while someone who saves 40% could retire in 22 years. By viewing everything from this perspective, you should have a better understanding of exactly how much you need to make and save in order to one day retire or stop working if you want to. Although in terms of when these numbers really begin taking off, Let's talk about the average net worth throughout your 40s. This is where you start to enter into what's called your peak earning years, which typically happens between the ages of 45 and 54. For instance, the median net worth throughout your 40s is now $125,000. The average increases all the way to $791,000. The top 1% requires a minimum of $6.5 to $8.4 million. And if you want to reach the top 0.1%, in 2025, you would need $22,194,000. On top of that, in terms of how much the median 40-something makes, that amount is $60,000 a year. The average is $85,450. And again, if you want to make it to the top 1%, you could do so by making $400,000 a year or $1,062,000 a year if you want to be within the top 0.1%. By the way, fun fact, I know we always hear talk about the top 1% or the top 0.1%, but where wealth really begins to take off is at the 0.01%. And to enter this level, you need a baseline wealth of $227 million or an income of $8.2 million a year. Anyway, coming back down to reality here, it really seems like one of the biggest drivers of wealth at this stage, according to the data, surprisingly, isn't so much your income, savings rate, or expenses, but instead whether or not you own a home. In this case, a 2023 survey found that 70% of U.S. homeowners were 45 years or older, and overall they had a net worth that was 40 times higher than that of renters, at $225,000 versus $6,300. Of course, you could also argue that those who have higher income, a higher savings rate, good credit, and a long-term mindset are more likely to buy a house in the first place, which could skew the data. But regardless of that, number one, you should consider buying a home if the numbers work. I'll admit, this one is certainly not required, but long term, it will give you a lot more stability throughout retirement. If you own a home that's paid off, you're not going to be at the whims of a landlord, and long term, values have trended higher. Of course, we're also in a very unique time these days, where renting is the cheaper option throughout all 50 major US cities, and there's never been a larger homeowner burden in history than there is now. But it is worth at least looking into. Also, with second, maxing out all of your retirement accounts. This would include a Roth IRA at $7,000 a year, potentially a 401k at $23,500 a year, or an HSA at $4,300 a year. That way you could do your best to reduce your tax liability. After that, though, third, you should stick with a budget no matter what. Even though technically this is something that you should be doing at every age, it's especially important here because chances are, even though you're earning a lot of money, you're also probably spending a lot of money. That's why it's so important to still live below your means, think long term, and make sure whatever you're doing is sustainable. And fourth, if possible, make sure to have 5 to 7 times your annual spending invested. As an example of this, if you spent $50,000 a year, you're going to have $1,250,000 invested to cover your overhead. That's why in your 40s, this is the number that you should be focusing on, not necessarily your net worth, because once you hit a certain point, compound interest is hopefully going to take care of the rest. All of that leads us to, next, the average net worth of your 50s. At this point, we see a median net worth of $288,000, an average net worth of $1.4 million, and a top 1% net worth of $13 million for those in their early 50s to $15 million for those in their late 50s. Separate from that, what's interesting is that your income throughout your 50s really doesn't differ that much from the income throughout your 40s. In fact, the median salary here is still around $60,000 a year. The average is around $77,000 a year, while the top 1% earn around $400,000 to $500,000 a year. The top 0.1% even earn a very similar $1.4 million annually. Now, by this age, most experts recommend that you have 6 times your annual salary saved and invested for retirement. But if you were to follow this advice, you could actually be pretty far behind. Like, consider this. It was found that the average person spends about $58,000 a year in retirement, which works out to be about $4,800 a month. So with $2,000 a month coming in from Social Security, you'll need to make $2,800 a month to bridge the difference, assuming no health complications or unexpected life events. This means following the 4% rule, which says that you could spend 4% of your portfolio every single year without running out. You would need to have $845,000 invested in order to retire. This means in your 60s, you should first pay close attention and track your spending. This will give you the best understanding understanding in terms of how much you need, how much you could save, and what you would have to cut back on, if anything. This could also be the point where you consider moving to a cheaper location, or maybe start buying lottery tickets and hitting up your kids for money. And second, depending on your situation, you should also be about halfway through paying off a mortgage, if you have one. Hopefully once you do this, your expenses will go down tremendously, and then you'll have the peace of mind knowing that you're always going to have a roof over your head, no matter what happens. And finally, we have the net worth in your 60s, which is where numbers begin to peak, and in some cases, actually begin to go down as you begin scaling back. Like, as you could see, the median net worth is $439,000. The average has grown all the way to $1.7 million thanks to compound interest. And if you want to be in the top 1%, it's a net worth of $17 to $22 million, which tends to be where these numbers max out. For example, every age bracket at this level and above, from median, average, and top 1%, decline, likely as people work less and begin spending down their money. However, a few things in this age range will probably begin to happen. First, you'll be able to pay off your mortgage in full. This will give you a paid-off asset that you could eventually sell off to an unassuming millennial for 10 times the price you paid, and then retire in Florida while enjoying your 0% state income tax. Second, spending actually begins to go down after the age of 65. Yes, this part's going to sound a bit depressing, but research has shown that worsening health associated with aging reduces the need or desire for some types of spending, such as trips and vacations. So at least the bright side is that, you'd be able to save a little more money if you haven't done that already. And finally, third, now is the time where you could begin withdrawing from your retirement accounts without any penalties. Remember, profits earned within a Roth IRA are completely tax-free after the age of 59 and a half, so all of that is yours to spend. You could also begin collecting Social Security in your late 60s and begin withdrawing from your 401k, giving you a lot of money left over to hopefully buy that McLaren 675 LP Spider. Just kidding. Anyway, all of this is just to get you to realize that even though net worth is important, a more reliable indicator at the end of the day is simply how much you have invested versus how much money you spent. Like, I know it's an extreme example, but it's entirely possible for someone to make $50 million a year and be completely broke because they spend everything that they make, versus another person who's financially free making $70,000 a year because they own everything outright. This is why it's so important to live below your means, be very intentional about how much you spend, and make sure to